Guess what, friends? It's Mer May! I decided that I was going to do a theme month for Mer May because, like, 6 months ago, before I was married, 8 months ago, before I was married, my sister-in-law gave me this fabric and some lining fabric as a wedding shower gift, which was really fun. I really enjoyed it. As soon as I saw it, I was just like, I knew what it needed to be. It needed to be a 1920s mermaid dress. And then that got my gears going, and I was like, well, there's a lot of other mermaid themed projects I really want to do. So I decided that I'd do them all, or at least like 3 of them, in the month of May. Now, before I get started with this project, this is going to be a little bit of a garbage fire. I don't know what the deal was, but with this slip, like, literally everything went wrong. So prepare yourself for that. Also, one of the things that went wrong was I lost the first day of footage. It just disappeared off of my hard drive after I had already edited it. So I opened up my editor and it was like, yeah, these files are gone, but we saved your timestamps in them. And it's like, cool, great, thanks. So I'm gonna kind of have to explain the first day of work to you real quick, and then we'll jump into the rest of the project. If you're someone who is learning how to troubleshoot, this might be a very practical video for you to watch, because troubleshooting is a learned skill, that is for sure. And a lot of it happened here. So initially, I took my measurements and I made this cute little chart that I laid out on top of my fabric and got some really dreamy shots of my measurements and where I put them in relation to my fabric, and I cut this shape out. This method is called the one-day dress, and it was a 1920s magazine idea that went around. Morgan Donner has made one, as well as a few other people, and I will have their videos linked in the description box below, because they're going to be a lot more informative than this one is going to be if you're actually interested in making a one-day dress from the 1920s. I put it together. It was my first time doing side gores, and I did a French seam on those, and I did this lovely, dreamy hand gathering, and I got beautiful footage of it that is now gone. And I put it on and it didn't fit by I want to say 3 inches. It came down to my waist from my bust, and from there it just would not go down any further. And that's when I realized that my bust to hip ratio is not standard. I have much wider hips than I do a bust, which I knew that visually and I knew that from my measurements, but I hadn't fully thought through how that was going to affect this, because right here, which is supposed to be fitting at the low hip, this has the same measurement as my bust. So what I did was I cut down the back of it and I added a panel so that, I could actually put the slip on. Finished all of that with French seams. Obviously, those were standard for the era, and I particularly enjoy them. And then I did the rest that you'll see here.
So the first thing that I did to correct my mistake of adding my full hip measurement to the entirety of the torso was make these little darts all along the top edge of the garment so that my bust measurement wouldn't be way too big anymore. And this fixed the problem perfectly. Next, I decided that I was gonna, take it easy and just make a nice long strip of continuous bias tape. I used to do this all the time in the theater. I know this method like the back of my hand. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. I did it totally wrong. I wound up cutting out, not on the bias, but I cut out just fabric tape that was on straight grain because, I don't know, I was just having an off day. So I scrapped this after sewing my whole tube and everything, unpicked it, and cut out a strip of bias that was long enough for my neckline on itself because I really only needed the bias tape for the neckline. I just wanted to have gold bias tape because it seemed like a nifty thing to have on hand. And I really felt like I needed a win. You'll see here that I have my raw edges of my bias tape tucked under so that I can sew over them and they're just totally encapsulated. This prevents the fabric from wearing out in the long run. Next, I pinned my dress to my dress form, and I folded my bias tape in half so I could line up the center of that with the center of my neckline. This really wasn't all that important, but I wanted to do things, you know, the quote-unquote right way because I had had so many things go wrong on me, and I was just very frustrated. Thankfully, the neckline went really fine the second time around. The first time I sewed it on, I had to unpick it because my tension was off. But right now, everything's fine. See? Everything's fine. Every so often, I will have a project that is really frustrating or, you know, just things keep going wrong, and usually that has a lot more to do with me and my own headspace than it does with my actual physical project that I'm working on. It's not like this is magical evil fabric that just wants to thwart all of my plans. I was just pushing myself too hard, not resting enough, and trying to go too quickly. The best thing that I could have done for myself and this project was to put it down, walk away, and come back to it when I was in a much better headspace. It would have made this a lot more enjoyable, and the final product would have been much better looking. After carefully stitching down my bias tape, I ironed everything very carefully into place, making sure that my raw edges were not exposed, and I pinned my straps on after trying the dress on and figuring out where they went the best. And instead of doing any hand stitching, I decided that I would use my machine's fancy embroidery stitches, and I put this cute little tulip pattern along the top. And I just did some normal top stitching on my hem because I didn't really feel like wasting any hand stitching time on this. I was getting really frustrated with it and I just wanted it to be done. I think hand stitching may have been an enjoyable experience for me, but I was just sick of looking at this fabric. A rational decision? No, not by any means. Is it the decision that I made and went with? Yes. Yes, it was. But with all that being said, I'm actually pretty happy with the finished garment.
Now, this is definitely one of the messiest things that I have made, like, period. I'm not going to blame it on the synthetic fabric because I knew I was working with a synthetic poly satin and I should have ironed it very thoroughly before I began working with it. And that would have dealt with a lot of the little pin pricks that you're seeing, but I was going too fast and I was like, you know what, I have a deadline, I want to get this done. And that's a dangerous way of thinking because you do justify skipping very vital steps like this, and I know better. And I did it anyway. So don't do that. I'm not going to be doing it in the future. Yeah. The good news is that this is just the underlayer and something else is going to be going over it. So all of the little pin pricky bits and the little micro wrinkles are not going to show. With that being said, I like the shape it gives me. I think it looks relatively accurate. And I think the only problem that I have with it is a lot of extra fabric there, but I think that actually just was the way that these dresses were. I want to look at some more pictures and compare because it doesn't look quite right to me, but it's also a very different silhouette than I've ever worked with before, and I'm used to having a very, formed back. I think that's a mental adjustment and not a physical adjustment that needs to be made. All that being said, I'm really happy with it. I'm happy I did it, I'm happy with everything I learned, and I will wear it with the dress it's intended to be worn under, so I'm gonna call that a win. Thank you for making it this far into the video. You are the real MVP. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a like so that the algorithm will show it to someone else who likes it. And if you want to stick around and see more from me, you could always just hit that subscribe button. It would make me very happy, that's all I'm saying. Bye, friend!